So we're out here in a winter wheat field that didn't do very well this spring as far as getting established. Where we reseeded spring wheat around this field, it was pretty much completely clean with kochia, but there was gaps in this stuff, obviously, and you can see the weedy mess that's behind us here. This would have been a nightmare with the draper header. We probably very well could have slugged the rotor, or possibly just had a really dirty sample. But what I was going to show you was how awesome this stripper header works in this stuff where the kochia gets out of control. And the other good thing with this is that our other option, had we just had a draper header, is we would have had to spray all of this stuff with Roundup and possibly sharpen, which I really don't like to do because you're spraying that chemical right on the seed. So we didn't have to pre-harvest this. It's really pretty cool and humid this morning, and we're still able to fly through this kochia here at about 6 miles an hour. One other thing to note in this winter wheat is that this kochia actually didn't come till quite a bit after the crop was well established in here, and this stuff actually is going to run, it appears to be in the mid 30 bushel range with this kochia in here with this drought, with no phosphorus supplied, no starter in the fall, and just a little bit of UAN. So even though this looks like a train wreck, and it is, we normally don't have fields that are this messy, it didn't hurt the yield on the crop as much because we sprayed the crop, we knocked the kochia back, we let it get going. And now we've got winter wheat actually with some pretty decent heads on it, and actually filled about as good as you could expect here, probably on 7 inches of rain or whatever this part of the farm got. So it's amazing how the difference in the timing works and how much kochia really affects your yield. And on top of that, we're going to be able to go back and fall spray this and clean this up. And next year it'll go into flax, which will have Spartan on it, which will knock all this kochia out of here. This is a bad kochia area. So I'm in the grain cart here. This is after we cut through those big kochia patches. I'll get in the combine and show you how this case automation stuff really helps clean this out too, along with the stripper header. But as you can see, there's some kochia in here. I mean, it's what you would expect, but not near what you would have with the draper header. Totally resaleable and not something that's going to cause major issues with the grain sample, I don't think. So pretty awesome. So here we are actually in the combine running, you can see the amount of kochia in this stuff, and as you can see on the screen there, this combine right now is running about 8 miles an hour through this stuff. We're only running about 13 moisture because it's not pulling a lot of that into the grain sample. And the coolest thing is this automation stuff sorts all this out on the go. So if you look on the screen there, starting from the bottom left, that's our fan speed. The next one up would be our how far open our concaves are. So we're at 1, so we basically have these closed almost as far as we possibly can for this stripper header. And it's still pulling all this kochia, the little bit that is pulling in the grain, sorting it and shoving it through. And then anytime the screen turns blue, when the numbers turn blue in that screen, it's figuring out, hey, I need to adjust this stuff because maybe my mog's too high. Which mog is material other than grain? That would be your middle funnel there. So when we get back to the screen here, I'll show you on that middle right-hand funnel. Your mog is the right side of that middle funnel. When that pops up too high, it knows, hey, I need to ramp my fan up to try and blow more of this crap out of the tank. So as we're rolling through this kochia at 8 miles an hour, this automation is sorting out all of this stuff, avoiding throwing grain out at the same time as cleaning this sample up, and doing it all at 8 miles an hour. And you'll see right now our engine load's only running about 50-60% when we hit these kochia spots. That's the only time with the stripper header that you're ever going to get much engine load on this thing, but it'll ramp up to about 100. It'll sort all this stuff out. Right now our rotor loss is pretty high, so it's going to do some adjustments for that on the vanes, probably up top where it says VS through F. That's the vanes, the inside the rotor cage there, and so it can slow down the material going through the cage just with those rotor vanes, which are adjustable as well. There's our sample in the back. You can see there's a little bit of foreign material in there, but not a lot. And this thing does just a remarkable job of cleaning some really horrible, this is the worst field on the whole farm, obviously, and we hate to show you this stuff, but the technology here is really something else. So as we're rolling along here, you're going to see this is going to probably spike something up in those funnels. Having these funnels in the red or yellow is a good thing. It needs to be there to do adjustments. So if you have your sensitivity set too low, there you're seeing sieve loss on the red on the right side, and it just opened up our top sieve from 14 to 15 to try and keep more of that stuff in. It'll also probably eventually bump that fan down a little bit, even though it's trying to keep the grain clean. So, as you guys can see in that video, that case automation stuff, that's really something, how it can sense what's coming in the machine. It looks at the sample, it can see the cracked grain and then how dirty the sample is, and it's adjusting all this stuff all the time, like way beyond what we could even begin to think of doing. So that part, really cool. I can see the value in those 250 series machines for sure in that. Update as we got to the end of the field, I think it actually averaged 28 bushels or something to the acre. It was still really good for here, for the kochia that we had. The one issue we did run into, we got about 70 acres into that really heavy kochia in that field, and it plugged all the concaves with that wet kochia that it was pulling in there. So if you're going to attempt that with the stripper header, it works really good, but I think we should have stopped and opened the concaves up and blown them out and cleaned things up, because then we had to pull everything out and clean it up. So that was the downfall of not pre-spraying all of that. It seemed like if we were in spots where there was plenty of wheat to mix with the kochia, it was just fine. But when we started getting into kind of some of the heavier kochia at the end, it did slug the rotor. But that's how we learn, right? We saw how far we could push it, and I think we made her about 60, 70 acres of some pretty serious kochia mess before that happened. So long story short, I hope you got something out of the video. The stripper header is pretty awesome in a whole nother way, right, as far as the dirty fields go. And this winter wheat, all this regenerative egg stuff, I think is going to average close to 30 with very little inputs. So that part we're really happy with.